item 11, and good progress on the Auckland Unitary Plan. Thank you, Denise and Christina. Tony Reedy and John Dogood. And good progress on addressing the appeals in the High Court and the Environment Court here too, Tony.
Thanks, Councillor.
So we've read the report, Tony. Anything you want us to highlight here?
We've just got a couple of maps that we're showing up which show the appeals as at November 2016 compared to, and the second map is September 2017. So it shows you the properties affected, they're highlighted in blue. You'll see that long line, which is the transmission line. That appeal's about to be resolved shortly, so that will come off in the next few weeks as well. So you'll see, in terms of the area affected around the region, we're less than 5% of the land mass. And in terms of the appeals, as the report has stated, there's only 38 remaining, and a majority of those are going to hearing, and the hearings have been scheduled over the next few months. I'll just hand over to John to see if there's anything else he wants to say.
Thanks, Tony. The only thing to really add is that, just for your interest, the remaining, of the remaining 35 appeals, 38 appeals, the big significant ones are Todd property in the Akura area, seeking that the rubber shifted north. That's had 2 weeks in the Environment Court. The hearing is adjourned, reconvenes shortly. The South Family Trust, that's the Crater Hill appeal in the south, again seeking that the rubber shifted further south and that land is included inside the urban boundary. That's going to a hearing next month in the Environment Court. Rural subdivision, so the ability to subdivide in the rural zone parts of Auckland. Several appellants there. That is going to a hearing in the Environment Court in March next year, so all parties are gearing up with their experts and their evidence for that hearing. Housing New Zealand, appeal on the references to special character in the regional policy statement. That is going to the High Court. It's been in the Environment Court. Council and Housing New Zealand have both appealed to the High Court on that issue. That's the fourth one. Fifth, Straits Protection Society is seeking some changes to the way that the rural urban boundaries dealt with on Waiheke. That's been in the High Court. It's now going to the Environment Court for a hearing on the location of the urban boundary in Waiheke. And the last one is Waitakere Ranges subdivision provisions. Again, it's been in the High Court. It's now being referred to the Environment Court. So a few of our High Court appeals have been determined by the High Court and then referred on to the Environment Court for further examination, I guess, in terms of the detail. So that's it in terms of the main substantial appeals that are left to deal with. So we're still hopeful that by middle of next year, early to mid next year, we'll have almost all of the appeals wrapped up and a fully operative plan. So this report is seeking that all parts of the plan that can be made operative are now made operative in much the same way as in last November, the committee made substantial parts of the plan operative.
Thank you, John. So our decisions today, members, make even more of the unitary plan operative, and there's, I think, Tony, you said that less than 5%. I think we talked about 95% operative at the last report, so we're probably quite a bit, probably less than way less than 5%.
That's great.
It's a difficult thing to estimate in terms of area, and we're not just talking about areas anyway. Yeah. So thank you. John, just to acknowledge your team in progressing the unitary plan to this stage. We're not far from closing in on fully operative, subject to those outstanding appeals. So acknowledge you, Tony, and your teams. Your teams have done tremendous work since September last year. September last year when we landed the unitary plan. So I want to acknowledge and please convey back to your teams our appreciation of your solid work in this area. Also want to acknowledge the councillors and member nominee that have been delegated with treating with the appeals, be they High Court or Environment Court, member nominee and Councillor Hulse, Councillor Denise Lee, no longer with us, and Councillor Mike Lee and Councillor Philip Piner. I think I've got everybody, and myself. Thank you to those members for always being available to resolve these issues, or at least address these issues. Yeah. Councillor Hulse.
Thank you. I was happy to move the recommendation, Mr. Chair, and echo your acknowledgement of our staff. I think for some of us, just one line, it doesn't quite convey the huge amount of work, complexity, and keeping us awake at 3 a.m. There's some very big names in here and some exceedingly complex issues. So I want to echo the Chair's warm thanks to your extraordinary staff who I think work above and beyond the call of duty and above and beyond the times that most people in the private sector would work. So thank you. Happy to move that, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Councillor Hulse. Member Namani.
Second.
Thank you. It's seconded by Member Namani. Any discussion, members? There being none, we can confirm that, or I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried, and more of the plan is now operative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
So those will stay here for the next one. Just see if some of these are bit-
Item 12
Pressure.
is the draft Hobsonville corridor plan change, and I have an indication of from Councillor Watson and possibly Councillor Walker. Would you move in second? Sorry, second.
It's okay, I'm happy to second, but I just wanted to speak. Ask some
Yes, Councillor Watson
questions.
will move. Councillor Cooper, you second?
Yep.
Thank you. John.
I'd just like to introduce Lisa Roberts, who's been working on this plan change. Firstly, identified by Auckland Transport an issue with the Hobsonville corridor area. There were some indicative roads that Auckland Transport feel are critical to the development of this part of Hobsonville. It's not the Hobsonville Point development, it's to the north of Hobsonville Road. It's, I think, primarily industrial zoned
It is
land.
light industrial.
Light industrial land. And when the plan was notified, indicative roads were shown on that land. They were removed during the process of the hearings. We're not entirely sure why the panel chose to remove those indicative roads. They retained indicative roads in some of the other precincts in the unitary plan. So that's one aspect that we'd like to introduce by way of a plan change. And there are some other design matters, I think, that we're looking to also address in this area. We are recommending that this plan change is put out as a draft rather than going straight into the formal proposed plan and submissions process. So it's a two-step process that we're recommending rather than going straight out with a plan change for notification. So that's just to allow the landowners in that area an opportunity to provide some feedback before the committee would make a final decision to notify the plan. That's about it, Lisa.
Yes, and I'll just reiterate that it is the consultation on the draft plan change as opposed to the formal notification.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, John. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just thank you. Just a couple of questions here. You're aware, of course, of the controversy that's been caused with the big warehouse right on Hobsonville Road. In terms of what we're proposing, what does that mean in practical sense to that type of building that has caused such concern in the community?
So that particular building was assessed under the operative district plan, the Waitakere section of the district plan. The unitary plan has slightly different controls for this area at present, but the draft plan change would would give the council additional ability to look at those sorts of design issues. It's not proposing to change the heights of buildings, but it would require a resource consent for buildings in that particular location.
Yeah, that's correct. So buildings along Hobsonville Road and along adjacent to the boundaries of Hobsonville Primary School would be subject to a resource consent application and assessment against some design criteria.
Okay. So at present under the unitary plan, it would be permitted activity as long as you meet the height controls and other setback controls and so on, but there would be no resource consent required. Under the draft plan change, there would be resource consent required in the locations that Lisa mentioned.
Okay, and then the other area of concern, of course, was the school. So what you're saying there is that the proximity, perhaps to the school boundary or to buildings, school infrastructure, is not going to be as permissive as it was under the operative plan.
Yes, so the design criteria that would be introduced to buildings proposed, buildings and additions proposed along the school boundaries and the road. The design criteria cover matters such as design articulation, building height, building setbacks, landscape treatment of yards. So those matters would be considered. In the light industry zone, the specifics of those are not covered to the same extent.
Okay, so, Mr Chair, so in terms of that, you said there's no change to the heights. In terms of that massive warehouse that's still up, I've had photographs sent to me that show shading, sun being blocked out for houses on the other side of Hobsonville Road. Any of the
Can't take it
new
down, unfortunately.
new features being proposed here, would that have any effect on that? So people actually, their sunlight's not being blocked out, as is currently the case?
As John mentioned, there's no change to the height proposed at the moment in the draft plan change. However, consideration of building height assessment would be undertaken as part of a restricted discretionary activity assessment for each particular site and what's proposed on it.
Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper?
Thank you. Just got a couple of questions, because first is, have these changes come about? I mean, I don't imagine they have, because these reports take weeks to get to here, but because of the uproar from the community, or we were thinking about doing this already, and we've put it together with the AT request?
No, through the chair, as I mentioned, it was initiated by Auckland Transport. So Lisa and others were already looking at this area entirely by chance.
Yeah, I know that, but
prior to the,
we added this extra bit in terms of assessment of setbacks. I mean, I asked the question because along with the councillors for the area, I'm getting a huge amount of flack as a former Waitakere City Councillor and representative from that area, because in good faith, that community were told we would have urban design guidelines. So I'm a bit surprised when you said that it was this storage place was assessed under the old Waitakere guidelines, because it just, that whole thing talked about setbacks, and this is not at all setback.
So, I've briefly read the urban design and planning assessment of that application, and it was assessed against the operative Waitakere plan. There was an urban design assessment, and the conclusion was that it was a reasonable design in the context. So, I can't really speak to it any more than that.
I guess for me, Mr. Chairman, I'll just do my speaking term now, is that I've read the decision as well, the assessment by a staff member, a staff planner, and it talks about only taking into account the new receiving environment, and clearly, and it actually said we don't need to take into account across the road, but it's clearly, I live near there, right, so I go past it a lot. It is shading. It is absolutely shading houses across the road, and that is a really wide road. And so my concern is that even if we do this, in the lead lag time between the consultation and everything, which I'm sure they'll be telling you loud and clear what they want and don't want, is that some more of these will already go up and it'll be too late. So everything along that road frontage could arguably be built before we even get those guidelines in place, and then it will be, a fait accompli, and that's my biggest concern, because nowhere did, a lot of the other buildings there now have got quite a decent setback, but this is just, God, it's just really terrible. But, and there's nothing you can do about it now. You won't be able to pull it down, you won't be able to do anything, because they've done everything by the book. But I'm really concerned that even though we had guidelines before, and when we did Plan Change 13 under the Waitakere City Council, 14, sorry, that was the biggest issue for people. Don't make it look industrial, set it back, give it gardens, do all these things, and that's not been done. And so I suppose this isn't your brief, John, but I'd really be requesting that we start asking our staff when they are assessing these applications that they do actually take into account the existing environment, not just the new environment, because it's just giving terrible outcomes. But I don't know, if that can be passed on, but thank you for doing this, at least, that's good. But I'm just worried that the horse is bolted now, it's going to be too late.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker?
Sure. Just want to pick up on the earlier comments made by Councillor Watson and Councillor Cooper going forward. And that is that it is very clear that there are going to be significant gaps, significant issues with the unitary plan as proposed, and there have been issues with previous plans. And I'd suggest, Mr. Chair, that we need to log these occurrences. And these may be community perceptions, they may be difficult, they may be different to some design consultant or the like, but nevertheless, as far as Aucklanders are concerned, they are significant. And it goes to actually building a case for making changes to the plan. If the plan is not producing a livable city, is compromising people's light, is compromising things, and that is the outcome that we're seeing. So my question, Mr. Chair, that goes to that is, do we have a facility to document instances such as this, which are escalating in Auckland, as we see, obviously, developments that are good, but also developments that are frankly bad?
So, Mr.
Do you have
Chair,
a
well, no,
brief reply on that
absolutely. I mean, it's a very valid point. We receive feedback all the time about things that are working well and not working so well from professionals and members of the public, and we are capturing all of that information. We reported to committee, I think, last month through one of our reports that we were looking to do an enhancements plan change around about the middle of next year and bring that back to committee. So we're looking to, I guess, improve the unitary plan through that plan change. Once you're getting to something that's a bit more targeted or specific, it probably warrants its own individual plan change. So I think as we, over the next few months, as we start getting that feedback in, developing that report for planning committee around about the middle of next year, that will be the opportunity for the committee to feed in ideas that you're hearing from your constituents at that point. And then a decision, I guess, can be made about whether they go into an enhancements plan change or a standalone plan change further down the line. I'd certainly be very keen for us all to take a very structured approach to that and not a sort of ad hoc, knee-jerk, issue pops up, plan change type approach. And but that's for next year, I guess. We've also got a monitoring requirement under the RMA, so there's a monitoring program underway to sort of look more broadly, longer term, at how effective the unitary plan is.
So, John, on that note, that we've got interfaces between zones very similar to this in many parts of Auckland. So, can I take it that when we pick this up in the refinements plan change, that might reflect these likely changes, yet to be confirmed, in other precincts or areas of Auckland where we're facing similar problems?
Potentially, it could be in scope. Yep,
That's something for us to discuss later on.
And I think this is a good test case to see what sort of feedback we get from landowners, business owners and the community about that interface between industrial and residential. The various legacy councils dealt with that interface in very different ways. I think you've got a very stark situation here where you've got greenfield, paddocks opposite existing housing. That does happen in other parts of Auckland, but it's not as common as industrial next to residential in the existing built-up area, which happens all the time. So it certainly, when something new pops up, you're much more aware of it in a greenfield situation like Hobsonville.
Sorry, do you mind if I just, I'm not against, I want it to remain light industrial because we need the jobs, we need that, but I just think that if we're going to do this, people don't like change. We know people hate change, especially when they've lived there for a long time and the expectation is this is a rural area. And we know that the school has been angry for about the last 15 years about this and continues to be angry that they're not rural anymore. We can't change that, but if we do good design and good decisions around placement and things like that so it doesn't interfere with people's lives, like this building does, because it changes the sunlight to the house, then I think we can do this. But and I don't agree we should do ad hoc stuff all over the place. So I really support, if we can look at something like this and then say, well, wherever we've got these situations, those can be part of an assessment. I think that's really crucial to our credibility, but also our ability to continue to open up business land.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded. Councillors Watson and Cooper moved and seconded. And all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. And we'll declare that carried.
Oh,